Welcome, everyone, to Potential Awaits podcast. My name is Sue Wedsworth, your host, coach, and professor that founded WORTHResults to help people maximize their potential and achieve what they want out of life. Today, we're going to talk about an inspirational sports story. So put away all your distractions and focus on today's lesson because this podcast class is now in session. Sports. It affects so many lives. Many people are very passionate about it. So much so, their passion translates to their children. I know that for me. I was involved in sports as a child, and today I still love sport. For one parent, however, the notion of starting a minor sports football club didn't come from the love of the game, but the opportunity for herself and her community to benefit from it. This is her inspirational story of how the Oakville Titans Minor Football Club was created. Now, even though I've known about this story for some time, I had the opportunity to sit down with the founder of the Oakville Titans to ensure we got all of the inspirational details. For those of you that don't know a lot about Oakville, it's a city. They, like to call themselves a town, considered in western part of the GTA, and has a present population around 213,000. It's nestled on Lake Ontario in between Mississauga to the east, Milton to the north, and Burlington to the west. Sports are very popular in Oakville, especially soccer and hockey. Many parents have their kids interested in sports very early on, in either one or both of those. But football was never a huge interest for Oakville. In fact, not up until 2009, it didn't have really any football presence. You had to drive to Mississauga or Burlington to have your kids play the sport. For my friend Heather, in 2007 and 2008, she had to drive her son in rush hour traffic 3 times a week for practices and every Saturday, just like all the other Oakville parents whose son wanted to play football in Burlington. The idea came to her about starting the Oakville Club really from a series of events. It was the perfect combination. First, the inconveniences of driving there 4 times a week. Second, as you spend a lot of time with the parents at practices and at games, you realize that they all talk and they become connected. And what they talked about was, the traffic from Oakville and ways in which the Burlington League could be better. Typical parent conversations. But the third factor was that the team manager had actually quit. And since no one decided to step in, Heather thought, why not? She will. She may not know anything about football, but she knew how to manage money. When she took on that role, she realized that every parent and child was from Oakville, and not just her own son's team. During her time as manager, she did some research and realized that half of the Burlington Stampeder Club was made up of Oakville families. That was a huge revelation. Half the entire club, estimated at 4 to 5 age groups of 40 kids each, was from Oakville. Right there, the numbers made sense. Remember my second point? Parents spent a lot of time with each other at practices talking. Well, she talked to some parents on how they would feel if an Oakville club was available. As the conversation grew, they also talked about what would need to be different from Burlington, other than the location, to make it doable. Everyone was for it, but no one was stepping up to start it. Now, keep in mind, this wasn't a few conversations. This was conversations that they had at practices, on buses to the games, at the games, for weeks and every weekend. A lot of data and information was being collected. The final part, since these were peewee parents, she was largely speaking with. She knew that if she got them to sign up with an Oakville team, then they would be there for at least a few more years. But for this to work, she needed someone who knew football and had football connections. Understand this. Again, Heather knew nothing about football. Yeah, she watched NFL and, of course, her son's practices and games, but really knew nothing about the positions, the costs, the equipment, about starting or managing a football club for sure. However, she did have access to the present coach of her son's team. Again, riding the buses to games gave a lot of time to talk. Not only was he the present coach, he was also very connected in the football industry. So getting him on board would mean having that crucial football knowledge and connection to help her develop it properly. The other interesting thing about Coach Bob was that not only was he connected, his son was the quarterback. So both of them were ideal to help recruit coaches and players. And after a bus trip to Ottawa, he was in. So the idea was formed and decided upon. Fantastic. Now they needed a place to play the games, which meant support from the city and a league to join with. But first things first. Luckily, Coach Bob's wife worked for the city, and lucky for Heather, she was the one that arranged a meeting with the mayor of Oakville to present her idea of the new Oakville Minor Football Club. In a few short weeks, they went from frustration to idea to meeting with the mayor. Bob and his wife invited the mayor to their home, where Heather made an hour-long presentation. Now, she recalls she wasn't as prepared as she would have liked to have been, but the mayor not only provided his support, but said he would provide a football field built if they were successful in getting it off the ground. Now, at that time, there was really only one football field in Oakville, Bronte Park, which, of course, was on Burlington's border. With really only one field, and at the mayor's recommendation, they would need to talk to the Parks and Rec department head, Patty Peoples, to determine what they needed to become successful as a youth minor football club. It was all about the fields, Heather reiterated to me in our conversations. The fields, the buses, trainers were the number one expense of a club, and she needed to know what Patty needed to see in order to get her support. Patty controlled access to the fields, and without the fields, then there was no club. Heather learned in that meeting with Patty that the more players you have, the more field access you would get. Patty's knowledge that she shared with Heather was invaluable to Heather's cause. After talking to Patty, they needed to find a league to join. At that time, there were only 2 leagues that could be applicable for joining. However, Burlington now had started to get wind about this new club that was being formed in Oakville. And since Burlington was a founding member of both leagues, they were not going to make it easy for Oakville's new football club to join either league. In the fall of 2008, at an annual general meeting, Heather, her husband Ed, and 2 of the coaches set out to present their club to the league. The mayor of Oakville also came to lend his support and present to the league. Now, Heather wasn't on her own now, and luckily for good reason. This presentation lasted 30 minutes, but had 2 hours of questions. However, the questions were not directed at her. Most of the club members in the room didn't really acknowledge her. Remember, she knew nothing about football. She presented the majority of the presentation and most about the finances other than the football specifics. It was Coach Bob and her husband who, by the way, knew nothing about football. He wasn't at the practices, didn't go to the games, but they garnished all of the questions. The largest critique, of course, came from Burlington. Notwithstanding that little hurdle, they were successful in gaining membership to the league. I asked Heather, when did it really become real? When was that idea actually a reality? She said, when they signed a 3-year term, $200,000 football equipment loan, luckily sourced by Coach Bob. But now it got real. It needed to be a success to pay back that loan. In the spring of 2009, the Oakville Titans Minor Football Club was created with 3 age groups, junior varsity, bantam, and peewee. One of the best sights, Heather recalls, was the exhilarating feeling she felt to see the boys hit the field for the first time. Their first summer in the new league, they won the championship. Now, don't think this journey was easy and not without significant challenges. Coach Bob left after that first season. Unfortunately, he got his championship and then left to find himself some more challenges. The other coach, key member of the club also left for more personal reasons. Now it was just Heather and her husband Ed. They had a short time to start recruiting parents and other coaches to help out. The other little gem was after the championship, that league that they just joined folded. So here they are, having to go to another AGM for the other league, which was now much larger, and had a lot more competition to join from the other folded league. Again, Burlington was there, and now it was just Heather and Ed making the presentation. No coaches and no mayor. But, once again, they got accepted. There was a lot of personal attention and time Heather gave to that club. There was a time a boy broke his leg quite badly, and she went with him to the hospital until the parents arrived. That's going above and beyond, if you ask me. In 2011, her husband went off to Europe for basically 6 months, and at the beginning of the next season, that was a real turning point. She was checking the equipment, and one of the helmets fell off the shelf and hit her square on the nose. Now, I'm sure all of you were wincing, picturing that. She began a full breakdown and started crying all over the place. She was running the club basically alone, and her son, by now, was done playing. She could just stop. One of the coaches actually came in and saw her crying and realized, after talking with her for a while, she was doing this all alone. He began to recruit people. Heather has always been infectious. Many people like her almost immediately. And there we are as another example of someone helping her with the club. She not only stayed with the club, but also that new league that they were a member of. In 2012, she became the secretary-treasurer. She was the first woman on the board in a very, very long time. So many people stepped up after that to help and keep it going. Personal changes in Heather's life happened too. She divorced Ed, got remarried, and still was involved in the club. They got a new president for the club as well, and Heather saw it as a way to let more and more go. Why is this all so important? In the past 14 years, her idea has helped 400 tackle and 300 flag football players a year. By the way, they started flag in 2010, play football in their hometown. That equates to 8,800 kids she helped play football in Oakville. Some of those kids came back to coach. Others continued in post-secondary playing football. My son got his coaching community hours with the Oakville Titans. One child plays for the Argos. A coach that worked at the Titans ended up playing for the Argos as well. They set the stage for better care for the players. They were one of the first clubs in the league to pay for a trainer and have a trainer at every practice and every game. Now that trainer developed her own business of a team of trainers. Oh yes, and that $200,000 loan I mentioned earlier, they paid it back in 2010. Heather says she can't even believe she got the loan back then and would doubt anybody would qualify the same way now. The new president Heather got for the Titans, her name is Marnie. Marnie's trying to build her own young female football league. And in 2017, Marnie was made president of that Ontario league. Now, Marnie and Heather helped not only the Oakville Titans, but also that Ontario league be the largest minor sports team in Canada. They've got 40 teams. Heather, who's now an avid CFL fan, she's also a Facebook fan. She's still connected to some of those parents of the boys who played in Oakville. She and a lot of those parents post memories and pics, and she's constantly being told how great those times were for their sons and daughters who played for the Oakville Titans. What started out as maybe a single idea not to drive so much turned into a Southern Ontario football club impacting a town and so many lives for the better. If you have an idea, pursue it. Let this story inspire you. You too can make an impact. That's it for today. Thanks so much for listening. I know there are a lot of choices out there, and so happy you spent time with me today. If you like what you hear, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a lesson. If you want to talk about your own story or have a specific question to be answered next time, head over to worthresults.com and connect with me. I would love to hear from you. See you next time.